is more than reading, more than writing, is more than math. You should first of all teach our children who they are. See, if you don't know who you are, then you will not know what to do with your life. Yeah. And if you don't know what to do with it, then you won't know how to achieve your goals. So Alex Haley raised the question of who am I? And he asked his mother, father, aunts, and his uncles who he was. Some people told Alex they were Negro. Some told Haley they were colored. Yeah. Others told Alex they were black. Some said they were Afro-American. Yeah. Some told Alex they were African. And lastly, some said American. Now, we have the only children and some adults that give 6 different answers to a very simple question like, who am I? Again, you cannot teach a child that is, first of all, not know who he is. It's more important than reading, math, and science. So we began to ask ourselves, why do Germans call themselves Germans? Why do Chinese call themselves Chinese? And we were told there's a land called Germany. There's a land called China. So let's go back to a world map. Germans are Germans, land called Germany. Chinese are Chinese, land called China. Let's go to a world map. Is there a place in the world called Negro land? Nope. What about color land? Nope. What about black land? What about Afro-American land? There's only 2 answers left, Africa and America. But be honest, what comes to most of our children's mind when they hear the word Africa? Tarzan? Running around, no clothes on, be honest. And what about America? Red, white, and blue and apple pie? That's because this word right here, which is nothing but his story. You didn't know that? It's all history is somebody's story. You know what I'm talking about. Columbus didn't discover America. He was lost. And the end discovered him, and Abraham Lincoln didn't free any slaves. Or another way to look at it, my story is very, very close to the word mystery. And I want to clear up a couple of mysteries right now. The book is titled Great People, Past and Present. What happened to a people that built the pyramids and yet now live in projects? What happened? What happened to a people that were the first to read and write using a term called hieroglyphics and yet now can no longer read or write? In essence, what happened to a people in terms of Egypt? It's amazing. King Tut came to America, and we didn't realize that King Tut was one of us. Somebody mysteriously took Egypt out of Africa and placed it in the Middle East. Now, how do you take a country out of a continent and then call it something else? As a result, we didn't realize that Egypt is in Africa. Egyptians are Africans, and we were the ones that built those pyramids. But my new history book, Lessons from History, Celebration in Blackness, for elementary, and there's also one for high school. You see, we are concerned about some issues here. The first one being, where do you start? You see, we have found that many black youth are embarrassed talking about the history. The Jews, now about the Holocaust, but us about slavery. I think one reason is where you start. The law says where you start will determine where you end up. Now, where do you want to start our children? If they started in 1619, they start on a plantation. That means they'll probably end up in a ghetto. But if you start 4 million years ago on a pyramid, they end up being free. Now, where do you want to start? On a plantation or on a pyramid? Because depending upon where you start will determine where they end up. Our first problem is we've been starting in the wrong place. And you cannot discuss 4 million years in 28 days. Black History Month. Now, I'm glad we got the month. It used to be a week. But you can't discuss 4 million years in 28 days. It's simply not enough time. And then the other issue, what are we going to discuss? You see, if all we're going to discuss are names and dates and events, then you can do that in about 28 days. When was King born? 29. When did he go to D.C.? 63. When did he get the Nobel Prize? 64. When did he die? 68. That would never change. But if you want to make it relevant, you connect the past with the present and with the future. In other words, what were our mistakes? Because the mistakes you want to avoid, and the strengths you want to reinforce. I'll say it clearly. Those that don't know their history, don't know their mistakes, are destined to repeat it over and over and over and over again. Our children need to know their story, and it did not start here.
All right, peace and blessings, all praises to the Most High. The man that you saw during the lecture, that clip, is that of Jawanza Kunjufu, who's an author. Some of his books are The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, Raising Black Boys, Positive Affirmations for Black Boys, Raising Black Girls, Keeping Black Boys Out of Special Education, and several other works. And he focuses on, as you saw in the clip, the knowledge of self. I've read somewhere where it said, you cannot teach a child anything else before you teach him about himself. Then you can teach them about other things, other civilizations. And that is what the word education means. It comes from the Latin word educare, to means bring out from within. And he starts by asking the question, who am I, or who are we as quote unquote black people? And he lists the several names that we have been given throughout history, but he makes a very, very valid point. Irish are called Irish because they're from Ireland. Italians are called Italians because they're from Italy. But the names we have, Negro, colored, black, Afro-American, none of those are particular lands. And the way that we've been taught in this country about our relationship to Africa has been always negative. I remember as a child seeing the pictures of kids with, foaming at the mouth with flies and big pot bellies. And that's all we see of Africa, or that's all that I saw of Africa as a child. That's why many black people today, as you see from American, they distance themselves from Africa. No, I'm not African. I don't know, but the African that is truly Africa is not like that. It has only became like that because of the different colonization. And that difference goes on to what we see in the education system here in America. All throughout my high school years, and I point this out a lot of times, is I was never taught anything about black people, Africans, anything of me positive. Only thing we read in school, and he mentioned this, was Christopher Columbus discovered America. George Washington never told a lie. Albert Einstein was the greatest scientist. Plato and Socrates, and so on and so on. And actually, if you think about it, we learned the same thing over and over and over and over again until 12th grade. Until we progressed in education, if you think about it. And that is not education, that is indoctrination. Because of course, the only thing we learned about black people, and that was during the Black History Month, was, Rosa Parks sat on the bus, Martin Luther had a dream, we were slaves, so on and so forth. There's nothing positive about what we learned about ourselves. So he makes the correlation, okay, if you start teaching people from 1619 that we were slaves, we had nothing, we had to come over here because we was running over in Africa uncivilized, then that's what we're going to perceive ourselves. That's why some people don't have the desire, the knowledge, the motivation to achieve better. That's why they end up in places. Well, I'm in the projects, I supposed to be in the projects. I'm going to jail because I supposed to be going to jail because I've been a slave, so on and so forth. But if you start from the great kingdoms of Africa, now he says 4 million years ago. I don't know, some people dispute, how long the human civilization has been on the earth. But however long it is, it's much longer than 1619. So they don't teach us about the great kingdoms of Africa, how we had scholars, astronomers, doctors, the pyramids, which nobody can see how they're built today, and so many other great discoveries, inventions, and ways of life, civilizations that were built off African culture. But if we were taught that, then we would know how great we are, instead of history, which paints us in the light of, savages and just needed to be, we came over there with the Bible and brought y'all Christianity. We brought y'all slaves and we taught y'all how to be civilized, and then, Jim Crow and such and such and such. So, I just decided to share that because I've always had a problem with the education system, because I didn't learn anything about myself throughout high school until I started reading books like the autobiography of Malcolm X, the miseducation of the Negro, the message to the black man, and all of the other cultural books, that I start to really gain a true knowledge of myself. And then I begin to reject that notion, that I actually begin to rebel against the whole system, because I saw what it was trying to do. It was trying to indoctrinate me to the greatness of whiteness. Nothing was ever done in the world by a black person that was good, except Carter. What was his name? George Washington Carver with the peanut. So I think, my brother, and it's a lot of other scholars that point this out, but you know, we have to learn that we have been hoodwinked, we've been bamboozled, we have been led astray by this education system, which focuses on the greatness of whiteness and the dereliction of black people, you know, in subpar. And if you continue to keep that mindset, then we're going to continue to be in the same position. Malcolm X once said, you can't expect your enemies to educate your children, or you can't expect your enemies to give you enough education to empower you to usurp them. And so if we don't learn the mistakes of the past, as he said, we're doomed to repeat them. And we're going to keep repeating them and repeating them. Like, what happened to all of those great civilizations? Many people feel that we invited the colonizers in and we showed love to them, and we didn't realize that their ultimate goal was to take over, to destroy us, to capture us. And so many people, once again, still feel like in a lot of ways you gotta distance yourself, or at least know what the what the enemy, so to speak, is doing. But y'all let me know what y'all think about what Brother Jawanza Kunjufu was saying in the video. 919-587-7782. Peace and blessings.